Louisiana has always been known for its rich culture, unique traditions, and vibrant cities. But behind the beauty and charm, there's another side to its history. A shadowy world shaped by powerful individuals who rose to the top of their game in ways that left a lasting impact. These figures weren't just influential, they were calculated, commanding, and relentless in their pursuit of control and power. In this video, we'll dive into the stories of the top 10 most notorious individuals who ruled the underworld in Louisiana's history. Their rise to prominence, the empires they built, and the legacies they left behind paint a vivid picture of a hidden world most people rarely get to see. Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking, fascinating, and sometimes unbelievable tales of these figures who shaped a darker side of Louisiana's past. Number 8. Eric Joseph Alexander. Eric Joseph Alexander, a drug kingpin from Lafayette, Louisiana, was at the center of a major illicit trafficking operation that spanned across the Acadiana region. He was a key player in an extensive criminal network involved in the distribution of these illicit substances, receiving large quantities of narcotics from sources in Mexico and the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. Alexander's organization was responsible for transporting and distributing hundreds of pounds of narcotics and between 5 to 40 kilograms of illicit substance per month. A significant portion of the narcotics was converted into crack illicit substances and circulated throughout the Lafayette, New Iberia area. His operation utilized secret compartments in vehicles, often custom-built by a local auto shop, B&M Auto Sound and 4x4, to conceal and transport narcotics undetected. Alongside illicit substance trafficking, Alexander was involved in money laundering schemes, particularly through B&M, where illicit substance proceeds were funneled through false payroll schemes to create the appearance of legitimate business operations. Alexander's criminal empire came under intense investigation, beginning in 2004 as part of a multi-agency operation called Operation Lion's Pride, led by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Homeland Security investigations. The investigation uncovered numerous incidents involving the trafficking of large narcotic loads and financial transactions tied to Alexander's network. The use of wiretaps, surveillance, and intelligence from law enforcement agencies ultimately led to his indictment. In December 2008, Alexander pleaded guilty to several charges, including conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute illicit substances, as well as conspiracy to commit money laundering and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He was sentenced in 2009 to 19 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Despite his efforts to challenge his sentencing, including arguing that his role as a leader in the conspiracy was incorrectly calculated, the courts upheld the conviction. As of the latest reports, Alexander remains incarcerated, serving his sentence. Number 7. Waco Collins. Waco Collins Jr. was once one of the most dangerous individuals in Shreveport, Louisiana, a figure who left a significant mark on the criminal landscape of the region. Known for his violent and aggressive methods, Collins headed a powerful organization involved in the distribution of large quantities of illicit substances throughout Caddo Parish. He was not just an illicit substance supplier, but a key figure in orchestrating operations that spanned multiple crimes, including violent altercations. Collins' reputation was that of a reckless and daring criminal who would go to any lengths to expand his empire. In 2009, Collins came under investigation following information about his illicit trade from a confidential informant. Authorities linked him to a network that used apartments as a cover for dealing large amounts of substances. Despite an arrest in 2009, legal loopholes allowed him to avoid immediate prison time. His reign continued unchecked until 2012, when the investigation gained momentum after a series of violent events connected to his operations. Collins was implicated in the demise of Anthony Ray Crane, a key player in his network, which ultimately led to his downfall. The breakthrough came when one of his associates, Kevin Smith, testified against him, revealing crucial details about the criminal activities Collins had orchestrated. The police's investigation uncovered a web of corruption, deceit, and violence that had been hidden for years. By February 2012, Collins was arrested and later pled guilty to numerous charges involving the possession and distribution of illegal substances. He was convicted as a habitual offender and sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Today, Waco Collins is serving his sentence, locked away for his role in some of the most dangerous criminal activities in the region's history. Number 6. Martrell Harris. Martrell Harris, a 42-year-old from Spring, Texas, has been identified as the leader of a highly organized group operating within Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Over a decade, law enforcement has investigated Harris and his organization, describing them as a network deeply entrenched in large-scale substance distribution and acts of violence. Known for his calculated decisions and authority, Harris was at the helm of an operation that extended its influence through manipulation, monetary rewards, and promises of advancement to those who participated in its activities. In 2017, Harris became the central figure in investigations tied to incidents that showcased the reach and ruthlessness of his organization. Authorities allege he orchestrated the harm of Lorenzo Dixon, also known as Zoe Reala, a local artist whose life ended after being confronted outside a Baton Rouge recording studio. Testimonies and evidence indicated Harris directed individuals within his network to carry out the act, offering payment in substances and monetary compensation to one individual, while others were promised higher status within his group. Dixon's demise was described as deliberate and calculated, leaving a lasting impact on the local community. Later that year, another event further emphasized Harris's dominance. He was implicated in the harm of David Walker, an individual reportedly possessing information connected to prior incidents. The case revealed that Harris utilized intimidation and influence, ensuring loyalty within his group while eliminating threats to its operation. Witnesses disclosed that Harris directed such actions with precision, underscoring his leadership and the fear he instilled in both his associates and rivals. Despite his involvement in numerous incidents, Harris avoided significant legal consequences for years, aided by a lack of direct evidence and the intimidation of potential witnesses. However, his arrest in 2020 brought to light the extent of his network's activities. Initially detained without bond, he was later released under strict conditions, including curfews and monitoring. Number 5. Jeffrey Demond Perry. Jeffrey Demond Perry, a former drug kingpin from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, operated a violent narcotic trafficking empire between 2006 and 2011. He led a network that distributed substantial quantities of substances, primarily crack illicit substances, from several key locations in Baton Rouge, including Evergreen Street and Louisiana Street. Perry's organization was deeply entrenched in the local community, with customers paying for the substances using various means, including stolen items, firearms, and food stamps. He would even rely on addicts to test the quality of his crack before distribution. Perry's ruthless nature was evident in his dealings. During his operation, he displayed extreme violence to protect his empire. In one example, Perry hired individuals to set an elderly man's house on fire, an act that led to the demise of 2 young men. Perry's indifference to human life was highlighted when he made cold, callous remarks about one of the young men as he lay gravely injured from the fire, illustrating his heartless approach to the criminal underworld. In 2011, Perry was convicted of conspiring to distribute narcotics, along with related offenses, following a lengthy trial. His conviction led to a life sentence, which was later extended after his unsuccessful appeal, bringing the sentence to life imprisonment plus 30 years. The evidence presented in court revealed Perry's extensive use of firearms, his involvement in a carjacking, and his efforts to rob both suppliers and customers. His gang affiliations were integral to his operations, with several associates involved in his criminal activities, including robberies and violent crimes. Perry's impact on the community was devastating, and the coordinated efforts of local and federal law enforcement eventually brought his reign to an end. He remains incarcerated, serving his life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Richard Pina. Richard Pina, a name synonymous with fear and control in the gritty underworld of New Orleans, rose to notoriety as one of the most influential figures in the city's criminal history. Operating from the West Bank of New Orleans, he was a Dominican immigrant with a small frame, but an imposing presence in the criminal world. Pina's empire spanned across several states, including Houston, Miami, and Mexico, where he orchestrated the flow of over 300 kilos of illicit substances each month, cementing his dominance in the region's illicit activities. His network was vast, with corrupt law enforcement officers in his pocket, making it almost impossible to catch him or his associates. He used these connections to manipulate situations in his favor, coercing individuals into working for him or facing serious consequences. In addition to his involvement in illegal substance distribution, Pina's reach extended into the music industry, where he sought to launder his earnings. Operating through music shops and even signing artists like Cain and Abel to No Limit Records, Pina worked to legitimize his operations. His criminal activities were intertwined with the world of hip-hop, influencing high-profile figures such as Tupac Shakur, who visited the city under his shadow. Despite these efforts, Pina's empire began to crumble as the authorities closed in. On April 17, 1997, Pina was arrested in Diamond Head, Mississippi, after an investigation revealed his extensive criminal dealings. He was indicted on several charges, including engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy, and charges related to substance trafficking. Pina pled guilty to all charges in January 1999, and on March 11, 1999, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, avoiding the death penalty in exchange for his plea. Despite filing appeals, his conviction stood firm, and he remains incarcerated to this day. Number 3. Glenn Metz. Glenn Metz was a notorious drug kingpin in Louisiana, leading the Metz organization, a highly structured and violent drug gang that controlled much of New Orleans' narcotic trade in the late 1980s and early 1990s. As the main organizer, supervisor, and manager of this enterprise, Metz orchestrated the distribution of over 1,000 kilograms of illicit substance in the New Orleans metropolitan area. His gang operated with ruthless efficiency, employing violence and intimidation to maintain dominance over rival dealers and solidify their control over several housing complexes. Under Metz's leadership, the organization committed numerous crimes, attempted assassination, and other violent crimes to eliminate competition and enforce loyalty. One high-profile act of violence involved the assassination of Samuel Scully Clay, a rival cocaine distributor, in 1987. This termination of life marked a turning point in the city's narcotic trade, cementing the Metz organization's supremacy in the local narcotics market. The gang's arrogance and brutality became infamous, with enforcers like Gerald Knapp Elwood and General Meatball Arthur embodying their violent reputation. Elwood gained notoriety for his bulletproof truck, emblazoned with the words "homicide" and "villain in black." Metz's criminal reign began to unravel in the early 1990s as authorities ramped up efforts to dismantle his organization. In 1993, Metz, his wife Danielle, and several key members were arrested and charged in a sweeping 22-count indictment. The charges included running a continuing criminal enterprise, narcotic distribution, and money laundering. Metz was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite his imprisonment, Metz's legacy continued to haunt the city. While his wife Danielle had her sentence commuted by President Barack Obama in 2016, Glenn Metz remains incarcerated, serving his life sentence till date. Number 2. Carlos Joseph Marcello. Carlos Joseph Marcello, born Calogero Minacory on February 6, 1910, in Tunis, French Tunisia, was a prominent figure in organized crime in the United States, most notably as the boss of the New Orleans crime family from 1947 to 1983. Marcello's criminal career began early, with petty theft and armed robberies during his youth in the French Quarter of New Orleans. By the 1930s, Marcello had risen through the ranks of the underworld, demonstrating his ambition and ruthlessness. In 1938, Marcello was arrested for trafficking over 10 kilograms of illicit substance, earning him a brief stint in prison. Despite being sentenced to a lengthy term and fined $76,830, political connections allowed him to serve less than a year and settle his fine for a fraction of the amount. By the 1940s, Marcello had aligned himself with powerful mafia figures like Frank Costello of the Genovese family, assisting in the transport and placement of illegal slot machines across New Orleans. After the deportation of Sam Silver Dollar Carolla in 1947, Marcello assumed leadership of the New Orleans Mafia. Under his command, the organization expanded its reach, controlling narcotics trafficking, gambling, and labor racketeering in Louisiana, Texas, and South Florida. Marcello forged close alliances with other crime families, including the Chicago Outfit and the Tampa Mafia under Santo Trafficante Jr., further cementing his position in the national mafia network. Marcello's notoriety extended beyond criminal enterprises. He was implicated in several conspiracy theories, most notably in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Critics of the investigation have pointed to Marcello's motive, his disdain for Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, whose anti-mafia crusades disrupted organized crime operations nationwide. Marcello's alleged ties to key figures such as Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald added fuel to these theories, although definitive proof of his involvement remains elusive. Marcello's criminal career was marked by repeated arrests and indictments. In 1961, under orders from Robert Kennedy, he was deported to Guatemala as an undesirable alien. However, he managed to return to the U.S. illegally and fought subsequent deportation attempts. His legal troubles escalated in 1981 with the FBI's Brylab investigation, which exposed a bribery and corruption scheme involving state insurance contracts. Marcello was convicted of conspiracy and racketeering in 1982 and sentenced to 7 years in prison, followed by a separate 10-year sentence for attempting to bribe a federal judge in California. Although Marcello's health declined after a series of strokes in the late 1980s, his legal battles persisted. In 1989, his Brylab conviction was overturned, and he was released from prison after serving 6.5 years. But Carlos Marcello later passed away on March 2, 1993, at his home in Metairie, Louisiana. Number 1. Telly Hankton. Telly Hankton was a notorious figure in New Orleans, known for his involvement in a criminal organization that ran illicit activities in and around the city. As a key member of the Hankton family, he rose to prominence within this criminal network, overseeing operations that were marked by extreme violence and a ruthless approach to maintaining power. His group's operations were deeply embedded in the narcotic trade, distributing significant amounts of substances, including illicit substance, and enforcing its reach with intimidation and force. Throughout his reign, Hankton was involved in multiple violent events, each an evidence to his domineering influence in the underworld. His organization went as far as to silence those who attempted to cooperate with authorities, threatening anyone who dared stand in their way. One such event included orchestrating a false alibi in an attempt to prevent legal consequences for his actions. Despite these efforts, Hankton's involvement in these criminal activities eventually led to his downfall. In 2008, Hankton became a fugitive after being implicated in an assault, which led to an indictment for a more severe charge. Despite initial legal setbacks, his arrest came after a determined search by law enforcement officials, culminating in his capture in Covington, Louisiana, in 2009. Hankton's criminal career reached its tragic peak when he was convicted of racketeering, conspiracy, and violent offenses, ultimately receiving a life sentence in 2016. His case drew attention not only for his personal actions, but also for the significant role his family and close associates played in furthering the group's operations. Hankton's organization was notorious for its ability to intimidate witnesses, obstruct justice, and enforce its control with deadly force. Members of his family, including his mother, Shirley Hankton, played supporting roles in his illegal enterprises, helping to conceal evidence and divert attention from their criminal endeavors. As a result, Hankton and several of his associates were convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment.